Hillside Plastics, so I am going to leave it right to them. And I'm going to introduce Jake Tomlinson. And he is from Gibson. Did I say your last name wrong?
You did. No, it's correct. That's correct. All right. Yeah, so welcome. Welcome to the Automation Breakout Session. I'm Jake Tomlinson, so I've been working as an automation sales engineer ever since I graduated from WPI here in beautiful Worcester, Mass.
Yeah, I'm Joe McLaughlin. I'm the Universal Robots Sales Specialist for Gibson. I've been with Gibson for about a year now. Prior to joining Gibson, I worked in manufacturing and went through a intensive five position 2-year program within a manufacturing company working for UR Robots. So I'm excited to see you all and talk about automation.
So we were asked by MassMEP to present today as a trusted local partner for automation. So Gibson Engineering, as you can see, we're an engineering-based company that has over 50% of our staff are degreed engineers. And our goal really is to educate our customers, because educated customers are successful customers who end up buying more automation. So many of our companies are small and medium-sized manufacturers. Many of our customers are small and medium-sized manufacturers. So that's like most of you. So our core competencies include robotics, vision systems, guarding and framing, kind of like this, industrial control panels. We started in 1945, so automation didn't look like this back then. It was more control panels. Value-add kitting for motors and cabling, sensing, networking on IoT, as well as machine safety. So that said, that's a quick overview of what we do. We're going to get into our kind of customer testimonial, which is Hillside Plastics, and let them take it away.
Morning, everybody. So my name is Brian Kaczynski. I've been with Hillside Plastics for 26 years, worked my way from production floor up to engineering manager. We were a small family-owned company at that point, looking to drive costs down.
Dave Blue. I've been with the company now 22 years. Again, started the same as him on floor and worked my way up to the engineering role.
So we became familiar with Gibson Engineering in around 2000. They were working with some outside contractors we had, and got to meet everybody, got to meet John, started having conversations. We originally started buying spare parts and components from them. The relationship grew from there. We started looking more into automation, and especially like you were out there with the lack of labor in the sales force. So where we're at now, we have made over 15 automation cells with UR robots, vision systems that have been deployed all across the country. Like I had mentioned, Hillside Plastics was a family-owned company. We were purchased, and now we were just purchased again by a very large corporate company, which we are still making equipment for these guys at this point too. So some of the pictures of some of the stuff we've made, there's a robotic packing cell, some vision systems. So just like quick return on investments for like this production cell here, we used 2 UR10 robots. The cost of the cell was $125,000 for the components. But that being said, we would have a full-time employee at the end of each line packaging these robots or packaging the containers by hand. So 24/7, 350 days a year. So looking at that, a full-time employee cost with benefits is roughly $56,000 used. So at that, the return on investment was $168,000, which was less than a 1-year payback. So I know the price seems expensive at first, but when you look at the numbers, you really need to do it. It makes sense. So we've used Gibson on numerous projects. There's so many, like over the 20 years, we have done so many projects with them, and they're really our go-to supplier for everything. And show you the video of this.
So we've got a few videos of some applications that we've done, and I'll talk a little bit more about them and how we went from this is a machine, this is a problem that we have, how do we get to a solution? I'll talk a little bit more about that after the videos.
So we've got the 2 UR10s, one picks them up and passes them off to the other one. For the maple syrup customers, they want the bottles packed upside down just for food safety. you've seen these bottles.
Yeah, this was a good deployment that we did together. This was your first UR deployment, so I went up for a day and a half, worked on some programming, just some best practices, how to actually use the robots, and then really, from there, Dave knocked out the rest of the communication between the other devices on the floor. But that's how we like to collaborate with our customers, where especially the first time you're on a new product, whether it's a new camera, a new robot, new anything, we want to give you all the support to be successful. And since then, Dave and Brian have deployed many more of these.
And to that point, if I ever come across an issue, I can always call him up and he's happy to help, and Gibson's supports all their products really, really well.
Here's another project we work with Gibson on. We have a proprietary process for those bottles. We actually flood coat the outside of them with an oxygen barrier so the maple syrup doesn't degrade. At the point when the family started the company, we would go through this process and we would have to store the bottles in a heated warehouse for 2 weeks to let the coating cure. We did a bunch of studies. We found that if we could accelerate the cure time by putting the bottles through an oven at 140 degrees for 1 hour. So we bought this huge oven, make a ton of cookies. So Gibson helped us out with this. So all the bottles file in single file. There's a big sweeper arm that pushes them onto the oven belt, and then you'll see the exit on the other side. So this was just huge for our company, just the amount of warehouse space we saved that we could actually turn into production space too, by not storing these bottles for 2 weeks in a warehouse.
And trucking, and logistics,
yeah.
and labor, and all those other things, right? Because if you didn't take the product, bring it to the warehouse, let it sit, manage it, keep track of it, all of those things went away by going through this process, so.
So how did this project develop too? Did you essentially call us and work with us, or do you have the idea? How did that?
We had a basic idea, but when we talked to John,
Yeah, I was gonna say, so maybe I'll introduce myself. I was gonna wait till after the video is done. Let me introduce myself as well. So, I'm John Robichaud. I'm an outside, I'm the senior automation engineer for Western Mass, or lack thereof. I've been with Gibson this is my 18th year, 18 and a half, I guess. And so Hillside is actually my customer, and I've worked with them through all of these projects that you see here. So a lot of these started with, hey, we've got an idea that, there's this spot where we either don't have a person to do it, or we've got to throw a bunch of people at it, and we don't have enough people, or we're just trying to, like Brian mentioned, drive costs down, labor costs down in this situation. And so they called us in for this particular one and said, look, we've got to put all of these bottles onto the conveyor, and they can't touch each other, because when they do, they stick together. So we looked at all the parameters of the project and said, well, how can we do this, right? And that's typically how most of the projects start with Gibson is, I've got this problem, I don't know how to solve it. And so when you look at our line card, there's some on our table out there, you'll see that we do a little bit of everything, whether it's robotics or vision systems or sensors or conveyors, anything in the automated space. We provide the bits and pieces to do that, but a big piece of what we do is the educational side of it, is we teach customers how to do this themselves. Because sort of the way, at least the perception can be is, well, this is a huge automated cell, it must be super complicated, it must be super expensive, which isn't necessarily the case. There are those systems that exist, but a lot of the times, some of the best paybacks are in the very simple, smaller applications where I just make a system that moves a part from here to here, and I don't need a person to do that. I can take that person and put them in another location to do something where humans are more valuable to do that work. If I'm just moving something from here to here, that's a lot of wasted talent in the human that's there. So that's, this one is very similar to that, where they were gonna, how do we get all these things onto the belt? So we looked at it, we worked on the system, so you see the conveyor that's coming in, then overhead we've got this sort of rake that separates the bottles. It's got some V blocks in there, it separates all the bottles, and then it takes them, this is the exit side, right? So we're taking it off of the oven and we're transporting them off to the cell that we saw previously, where we're taking the finished product and then putting it into the box.
And before this was deployed, we had 4 people at the end of this line trying to handle these bottles coming out, keep up with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because the other part of it, this one happens to be a pretty continuous process, but a lot of processes have sort of start stops. And so if a person's sitting there and it's stopped, they're like doing their thumbs or they're not paying attention, and then parts come in, and you know, it's a lot for the person to keep track of. Where this just continues to sense when product is ready, and it's, you know, a one piece or several piece flow through the oven that's there.
And so like John's point, with the 4 people on the end of the line, after we've deployed 15 cells, we've never laid anybody off. There's always more work. We still have production lines down that people get moved to. There's,
To this day.
yeah.
And just the other day, I looked at the productivity board, and we had almost half the plant was down, and it was due to staffing, it wasn't due to lack of orders. So,
Here's another part of a large automation project we worked with Gibson on. Models are, this is where it kind of goes through the coding process.
this was a big one too, ergonomically. The original machine that we did this on, people would load these bottles on by hand.
Each spindle.
And it's basically torquing a cap onto the bottle and then taking it off the cap when it comes off. And repetitive wrist motions, and I mean, it was really big safety-wise. It wasn't just automation for.
To the point where people didn't want to work on a machine.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I gotta run that machine today. So now you have, not only am I having a hard time finding the people, once I have them on staff, they don't want to do that job because it was repetitive and it didn't feel good at the end of the day. And so we worked together, and that's actually just a good segue into the robot lab. So part of what Gibson does, I talked about that education piece, is also we evaluate applications, right? So we've got a robotics lab where we can test applications. So you say, I've got this widget, I've got this box, I want to, you know, pick this thing up and move it around. How do I know if it can be done? And so we have a robotics lab where we do those types of things. So you'll see in the picture, this is actually the cell that's outside. We've got some other ones here where we're picking parts that are randomly associated, and we're picking them up, and we're you know, taking them from a random orientation and putting them into a known orientation and into a box. Just kind of a big overlay of our lab.
And Gibson has been great. We'll just call them up and say, hey, we've got an idea. Can we just swing down to Norwood and bring some stuff and take a look at stuff?
That's very common. We'll have people come in with their stuff and test it out with our equipment as well. Same with the Vision Lab.
Actually, I'm going to sneak back to a picture.
Here. So interestingly enough, you saw that application where we're taking the maple syrup bottles, and they're at different stages of the process. One of the things that the folks used to do at the end of the line that used to take them and put them into the boxes, they also would give it a quick visual inspection. And this is a common question, is if I take the person out of there, do I lose that ability to do quality inspection on the product? And so another big piece of what we do is machine vision. And for folks who aren't aware of what that is, it's a camera, a smart camera, that can take a picture of your product and with some configuration can inspect for specific quality characteristics that you're looking for. And so this is an example of a larger bottle, but we do it on all the different bottles at Hillside, where we've got these yellow boxes are actually just cameras taking a picture. So as this comes in, it stops, we take 6 pictures, 1 of each panel, we do an inspection, and we know if it's a good product or not. So that was a person that had to do that before, in addition to all this repetitive motion. Now they no longer need to do that. And that one actually is a very good example of where we utilized our Vision Lab. So our Vision Lab, so in our Vision Lab, it's a lot of wires in that picture. That's a really busy picture. So our Vision Lab is a room about half the size of this room, where we actually have all of the cameras, all the lights, all the lenses and things that you might need to solve an application. Because that can be another application or another project that might seem daunting. Like, how do I approach this? And again, we've been doing this for a long time. We recognize that can seem daunting to a customer. So we have this lab where we perform free vision evaluations. You send me a part, you say, I need to inspect this. I need to make sure that the wheel is here, it's the right color, Staples is printed properly as this comes by. And so we test it and we confirm what's going to work so that the risk to you for implementation is reduced dramatically. So you don't have any risk at that point.
In fact, we can do a full presentation, give you a BOM and quote with that, and as well as the job file that we created on the camera to you. So the implementation is very, very quick.
So that's it's just some pictures of the lab we use to check those bottles. So all the bottles that you saw being packed out today get inspected by Vision Systems.
Is that a visual then somebody gets sent that picture to take a look at to do a QA check? Or
Good question. Yeah,
or is it scanned and then is there some automation?
Yeah, good question. so if folks didn't hear the question, like what happens, does the picture go to a human for inspection, or, so the machine vision is actually, it takes the picture, it performs the inspection. So it gets programmed to actually do the inspection and give a pass or a fail. And then you have options for saving pictures for later, like some of the customers we work with, if they have a serialized device or something, they want to log those to a server, you can do that too for future reference. You know, one of your customers said, hey, this part isn't quite what I expected, you could go back and historically take a look. Yes, it went through our inspection system, we know it's good, kind of thing. We are a UL 508A panel shop. The reason we throw that up there is oftentimes folks look at this and they say, well, I've got a robot, I've got a camera, I've got a conveyor, I've got all these things. How do I get them all sort of wired together and talking? And if you've never done that before, again, it can seem daunting or it can seem overwhelming. And so we have a panel shop, and the folks at Hillside utilize, build their own panels, but these guys have started to do so many of these types of projects. We actually build their panels now too, just because they're able to deploy so many applications over time. So we can build panels in our facility as well. Jake talked a little bit about this earlier too, but we have a lot of other value add capabilities that we do at Gibson. So custom assemblies, this is we have a room where we literally just add connectors to motors for some large OEMs in the state. We do custom framing and guards. This is another one which is what I might call like low-hanging fruit, if you will. It's a pretty easy thing for us to come in and evaluate to see if you need a conveyor to move things around, or just a frame for your machine you see like that the robots are sitting on.
That's the same. Just stick with it.
And then we do also work with engineered solutions. We don't typically do the entire work cell. We have partners to work with that because you saw the territory that we cover. It would be hard for, we're a team of about 60 people. It would be hard for us to do work over that entire geography all the time building machines. But we do have engineers on staff that can help lay out a system like this. Like this is a system, as you can see, this is going to have parts in it. We're going to pick parts up, we're going to package them out, and take them away. Or this one can fill a box and then add a separator sheet.
Very similar to the application video that you showed.
Yeah, and one thing about this as well is we've tried to have a mindset of, we cover Maine and Maryland. We are part of a larger parent company that essentially covers all the 10 states in the United States. So we try to seek out integrators that solve very specific applications. So when you are working with John in Western Mass, and you say, I have a project and I want to do welding with a robot, we kind of take it back internally, say, is this something we would do as Gibson Engineering as an integrated system? Or is there a company that we can reach into our network and find the right fit? Because I think a long time ago, people would only work with the integrators that were located in their geography. It really does a disservice to manufacturers to not get someone who has repeatedly solved that specific application. Because at this point, I think there's 60,000, as an example, of one of our projects, it's like 60,000 to 70,000 UR robots out there globally. The same application's been solved a lot of times. So it's good to look and see what's been done.
It's just another example of things that we've done. Flexible feeder, so vibratory bowl with bulk parts, being able to use a camera to pick them up, and then an assembly and test station.
I'll quickly talk about this too, because we've mentioned it several times, but education is key, right? If you don't know how to use this product, it's not going to probably be implemented properly, or potentially not working the way you thought it was going to work. So Gibson, we do, it's actually more than that, but closer to 100 days of customer-facing training a year is a lot. If you think about how many days of the year that is. So that's where we are basically enabling you or folks at your company to have the skills to deploy a robot like this, which is very simple to deploy, but if you came for a 1 or 2 day training, you'd hit the ground running, you'd have this up and running in a handful of days, just like our team here does. And we do that on everything you can read here, but vision, safety, robotics, motion control, all the different pieces that are there.
Yeah. So, really quickly, we wanted to focus on universal robots today because it is a very flexible and easy to use tool. So I'm just curious, who is familiar with cobots here? Anyone? Anyone want to give me like a definition?
Talking about collaborative robots that work in conjunction with people and have built-in safety features to prevent catastrophic collision.
Exactly. So that is the definition of a cobot, which means it is safe to use. It's safe to use around people. Makes it very flexible. Universal robots. There are other cobot manufacturers on the market, Universal Robots is a little different because it has two more main things that we like to focus on as well. And that would be ease of use. So essentially, you know, you can go into the robot and take the free drive. I'm just pressing this button right here, save a few waypoints, and then that's how you get motion. We'll go through that a little bit more because we're going to have separate breakout groups where we kind of talk about different applications. So if you have any more questions about that, certainly ask. And then the other main benefit is ease of deployment. So Universal Robots, they just make this robot. They don't make any of the end-of-arm tooling, any of this stuff. They have fostered an ecosystem called the UR Plus ecosystem. And so they have essentially what is, you have your Apple iPhone, it's very similar to that. You have apps that integrated right into the robot, which make it very easy to deploy. So this gripper right here has a button that just says close gripper, open gripper, things like that. So we can kind of get into these breakout groups. So Silas, who's outside right now, will be doing kind of a main Q&A, just more about Universal Robots. He works for UR, so if you have any questions about that, he's the one. John will be at our welding demo. I will be outside with the palletizer. Joe and Antonio will be at our kind of bulk sort, so sorting from bulk parts, doing machine tending, stuff like that. So Antonio from FlexBox will be able to talk about that as well. And then, if you guys want to ask the Hillside guys any more questions, they'll be in the back corner, and ready to go.
Can I just make one statement before we break out? Because I just
Yeah.
want. My name is Christine Nolan. I oversee advanced manufacturing for the state, and we manage a grant fund that helps with capital expenditures for projects like this. So it's up to $250,000 in money to help with adoption of Industry 4.0 robots. So if you're considering projects like this, you should definitely reach out. The name of the program acronym is MassMEP, and so, but it's definitely got a lot of projects across the state that have utilized these, and working with people like Gibson.
The training is also approved already on the MassMEP website, so our trainings are on the MassMEP website and can be approved by grants.
And then there's a lot of state grants to help with workforce training as well. So you should all be accessing these dollars and taking a look at them as you move these projects forward.
Yes, so if you reach out to MassMEP, we will help you with all that. Thank
Yeah,
you very much.
that's right. We work closely with MassMEP to get a lot of these dollars and projects rolling.
So if we wanted to contact you about that program, would we go through a MassMEP or can I contact
You can go directly to me, either way. But MassMEP is very familiar with it. So, but I'll give you my.
We're already working very
We do
closely with
assistance, we
MassMEP.
don't charge anything for that assistance. We're here to help. We're here to help.
Really quick too, before we break out, we do have the UR20, which is a new robot, 20 kilogram robot, about 69 inches of reach, big, very large robot. It's their new gen. That is available at Gibson on Tuesday, May 23rd through the 25th. And we'll have a presentation later on the day on Thursday. So if you want to come, you're certainly welcome. We're right in Norwood, Mass. So.
Do we have any other questions before we?
Yeah, just a quick plug too. I work for Eversource. We work with the Mass Save program in Massachusetts, but there's Energize CT and NH Saves as well. There are incentives. If your project or improvement saves energy, we're interested in it. And if there's energy savings to be had, there's typically an incentive that we can provide for the equipment. So I don't know if I heard it right, but it looked like we went from a 2-week curing process, I don't know if it was baking or not, to a new oven that was only, an hour or whatever that is, right? Well, most likely there's going to be some energy savings associated with that, and we're able to provide incentives for those upgrades as well. So as you're doing projects, as you're doing improvements, I can't encourage you enough. Reach out to your utility company. I mean, it's going to be National Grid, Eversource, Massachusetts, out here, the other gas company, Berkshire Gas. So it's worth it, right? There's going to be energy savings. There's likely incentives that are available through your program administrator.
We can help in that regard too. I work with a company, I'm working with them right now, Western Mass, where we're replacing a bunch of air cylinders because air is very costly to generate compressed air. We're replacing with electric cylinders, and the Mass Save program and there's a couple other programs too, state funding that will help pay for a significant portion of it actually. So, so it'll be paid for in less than a year, and then after that, they're literally just making that money every year. And their uptime is going up because they don't have air cylinders breaking, so we can be helpful in that regard as well.
Great.
And if you forget any of that, again, you can reach out to MassMEP, we can guide you in the right directions.
On top of that, there's a lot of tax advantages that can be taken and invested in that, and that's what my company specializes in, is getting as much tax savings as you can. And R&D tax credits would be big for this type of investment, so it's something that everybody should take a look at when they go and do these types of investments.
Fair enough.
Any other questions? Great, so if there's any specific machine or anything specific you wanna ask, you can stand, you can come over and
The
look at
last
the
thing I'll leave
machine.
you with is, if you don't mind, we put up a link here so you can go to the survey, right?
Also available
One
here.
more, one more
Oh, I'm
slide?
sorry, one more slide.
That's just
There you
a
go.
picture of me, nobody wants to see my face.
To a survey, just to let us know what you thought about the session, if there's things that should be added or whatnot, so just some feedback, please. Thank you.
I know you would think I should have some. Well, we have a booth actually down. It's yeah, the CAM booth. That's down. There's a table. So. We do. So, you would think I should.
R&D credit, seems like it's
Well, there's a lot of things variables it's not really so the credit fall onto that. So even if it's not
Yeah, we've been doing it for a few years, yeah, this year. That's one extension.
Yep, that's what everybody's doing. Final extension.
Did you already stop it?